And we begin today at 5, one-on-one, nothing off limits with Louisville's police chief. This coming days after a former detective was convicted in the Breonna Taylor shooting, the continued negotiations for federally mandated police reform, and of course ongoing questions about the officer shortage and new public safety efforts.
My co-anchor Gilbert Corsi joining us from Studio B with Chief Paul Humphrey right now. Gilbert?
Fallon, thank you, Chief. Thank you for your time. I know it is tight, so we want to jump right in and start with public safety. LMPD down about 250 officers, crime reaching every part of the city right now. Gun violence, carjackings, which we learned today are up slightly from last year. Break-ins, many of these cases involving children, both as juvenile suspects and juvenile victims. You're the 6th police chief that the city has seen since 2020. What are you doing differently to make tangible impact here and lower these numbers, to fix this problem?
Right, and so you'll see, Gilbert, and you've heard me talk about it, about having an actual crime strategy that's holistic, that touches every part of the police department so that everyone within the police department knows exactly what's being asked of them and what the outcome is, and then how we work with the community in order to change the dynamics of neighborhoods. And follow on to that, you'll see that plan come out. We'll have a press conference about that in a couple of weeks, so you get the details of that. But the mayor is also putting together a community safety plan that'll address a lot of the root causes of violence. And so we are asking officers to go out and be proactive in addressing violent crime, and that's ultimately what we need to do.
What does that look like? Street patrol, like addressing at the neighborhood level? And when I say street, out of the car, walking down the street in some neighborhoods?
Well, when I talk about proactive policing, it's everything. We need proactive enforcement, whether that's traffic stops, pedestrian stops, but we need contacts, we need visibility. We need to make those relationships in the community so that people understand we're here to keep them safe, and they trust not only that we're going to do the right thing, but we're going to do our job well.
All right, I want to turn now to street racing. We want to show you some video. It's surveillance video from a recent WDRB report. It shows 2 cars drag racing down Bardstown Road. You see it here. LMPD reported that one of those cars hit almost 120 miles per hour. Court records say that same car slammed into a vehicle, killing a 77-year-old woman. We know LMPD is seizing cars and citing drivers for street racing and takeovers, but what are officers doing, as you said, to be more proactive with this, to stop it before someone else gets hurt?
So we've been asked several times about why we've put resources into street racing when we have a violent crime problem. Our job is public safety. It's to keep people alive, and you see from that incident, this is exactly why we take street racing seriously. It's because innocent people get hurt and killed. And so we are following our intel sources about where and when these street races are going to happen, where these street takeovers are going to happen, and we are being proactive in putting resources in those places and taking those cars. We have to get this problem stopped. I think we've actually done a pretty good job. You saw a real spike in it there for a while back during the summer, and luckily it seems like we've been able to impact that somewhat.
Have you been effective enough to take those intel sources and learn where the street racing or street taking over events are going to happen and be able to have officers there in advance? So when people begin to congregate, you can say, it's not going to happen here.
100%. And what you would find is if you went to our tow lot right now, you'll see 66 cars sitting on our tow lot that's been seized in the last 6 months. Those are cars that aren't going to be out there street racing, and it's also a warning to anybody who wants to.
2 competing proposals have come to light regarding masks and crime. It's an issue that, in fact, is going before the Metro Council at 6 o'clock tonight. You'd previously supported the more restrictive ban. Is that still where you stand? And if so, how do you make sure that officers aren't racial profiling? You talked about proactive policing and stops earlier. That's the concern from this community.
Right.
How do you make sure that your officers aren't just stopping somebody because of the pigment of their skin or the neighborhood that they're in?
Well, so part of that is education and training and doing it the right way. Part of that is supervision and making sure we're keeping track of what officers are doing, and we understand the impact of the strategies that we employ. Here it is. Here's the problem, Gilbert, is that regardless of whether it's masks or traffic stops or whatever tactic we use, any tactic has the potential to go sideways. And so this is about good supervision and good feedback systems to those officers to let them know where the right track is, and if they stray one way or the other off that track, let's get back on that track and make sure we're doing things the right way.
So we've heard time and time again about data guiding decisions. How often is this reviewed? Because an annual review that underscores
Right.
It's too late. Too many people have been, treated unfairly.
Right, and so data is about understanding what's happening now, and then also being able to process trends, right? You have to get real-time feedback, and so a lot of our supervision is that's what we're encouraging is if you see a problem, address it now. Don't wait until it becomes an issue either for that officer and impacts their career, or becomes an issue that negatively impacts the community at large. So take the time to intervene and give good guidance to officers right now, because ultimately it helps their career and it helps keep the community safe.
For years, there has been mistrust between parts of the public and your police department. The officers killing of Breonna Taylor during a raid at her home brought a national spotlight of scrutiny to now what is your police force. The feds were coming in mandating reforms. Will that still happen with Donald Trump winning the White House earlier this week, knowing that he has shut down these type of agreements in the past?
So specifically about the DOJ negotiations, we've signed an agreement in principle that we are going to negotiate with the Department of Justice. Those negotiations are ongoing. Regardless of what happens, I'm not Nostradamus, I can't predict the future. But what I can tell you is that we didn't wait for the Department of Justice to come in and tell us we needed to improve. Improvement is our culture now. This is what we're going to do. And you can hold me accountable personally that I am assuring you, Gilbert Coursey, that regardless of what happens, consent decree, whatever, I don't care who the president is, LMPD is about improvement. We've got great officers who are dedicated to doing things the right way. And so it's my job as the leader of this agency to make sure that we give them the resources and the supervision and leadership so that they can do their job as best as possible to take care of people.
The impetus of this question was partly addressing the public trust, though. And I hear you saying, we can hold you accountable. But there's a different kind of accountability that comes with a federal hand on your back. And so you said that you've agreed to negotiate. Will you go so far as to say that consent decree will be executed, not just negotiated?
We're in that process. When we get to the end of that process, which I think we're coming pretty close to it. I like where we're at. We'll take that process where it leads into court and sign that agreement when we get on the same page with it.
The mayor had said it was going to be early fall. It hasn't come yet. Do you think it will come before January 20th, the inauguration day?
I would expect that it does. I would hope that it be done before the new year. But in all honesty, Gilbert, I didn't think their investigation was going to take over 2 years. I didn't think it was going to take them a year to write a first draft of the report. So if you had asked me 3.5 years ago, 4 years ago, when this investigation first started, I would have told you we'd have had an agreement over a year ago. But that's not the way that it worked out. But what's going to happen is that regardless of what that agreement says, we're going to continue on the path towards improvement.
The DOJ investigation confirmed a pattern and practice of unlawful policing. Citizens were the victims in many of those cases. Some of those officers involved are still on the force today. Add to that, at least 7 current officers that we've reported on are suing LMPD right now for issues like discrimination, retaliation, and sexual harassment. If you want to repair public trust, what are you doing to weed out bad apples in the police department that have eroded it?
Well, first of all, let's understand something. Every discipline every mistake doesn't mean somebody needs to get fired. A lot of mistakes are rooted in our ability to take that officer and make an appropriate judgment of whether they need to be fired or not. And then when they're not, our job is to make them better, right? It's not to continue their punishment throughout their entire career. Let's give you your punishment. Let's take our pound of flesh, but let's make you better as an outcome. And so leadership is about what happens afterwards, right? Mistakes are going to happen. People are going to do bad things. The important thing is that the leadership takes care of those problems. And then is transparent about it. I think what you've seen, Gilbert, is over the past several months that I've been in this spot, I think you've seen a level of transparency that hasn't necessarily been here. I would argue that it's probably not. You don't get too many police chiefs around the country that are as open about things as I am. We're going to mess up. We're going to make mistakes. There are going to be officers that that do things wrong. We're going to take care of those. Some of these officers are going to get fired, some are going to go to jail, and some are just going to get talked to because they need coaching and they need mentoring and they need feedback. And so discipline comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and so that's my job, is to figure out what's appropriate and then make sure that the community understands why decisions are made the way they are.
And with our closing moments here, I do want to give you an opportunity to publicly address or respond to the verdict in federal court last week. Former detective, LMPD detective Brett Hinson, convicted for violating Breonna Taylor's civil rights the night of the raid at her home. He now faces up to life in prison.
Right, and you know, I've said before, you know, I testified in that trial. The behavior and the performance of Brett Hinson on that night is not anything that I would expect any LMPD officer to do. That's a big, complicated situation with a lot of different people involved that performed at different levels. But I can tell you that what Brett Hinson did shooting through those windows is not right, and it's not what I would expect from any other officer. And you have never seen another officer on LMPD do what happened that night, and that's why the situation ended up the way that it is. And so we understand the gravity of that, and I'm glad that that situation is over and justice is being taken care of.
Yes, I know the things that you've said in the past, but the public doesn't get a window into federal court because there's no cameras in there. So I wanted you to be able to address it here now. Thank you so much for your time today, and I hope that you come back and sit down with us again.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. So thank you.